Hi, my name is Brandon Wimmer, and I am the Deputy Executive Director for the Wisconsin Academy of Family Physicians. And we are here today doing the next installment of our Leadership Spotlight series, where we highlight leaders in family medicine who are members of the Wisconsin Academy of Family Physicians to share their leadership experience, to share ways that any member can get involved in the leadership of the Academy. And it's a great opportunity to share stories, learn how you can get involved, and different experiences that you can have within and outside of the Academy in terms of leadership. So I'm really pleased to be here today with Dr. Joe Gravel, who is the Department Chair for the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and also currently serves on the WAFP Board of Directors as one of our AAFP delegates to the Congress of Delegates. So Dr. Gravel, thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to be able to share your story, to highlight some of the things that you've done as a leader within family medicine. So to start off, you've actually had the good fortune to serve on the board of directors for multiple state chapters within the Academy. Can you tell us a little bit about your leadership journey within the WAFP and AAFP chapters in general?
Sure. So I started a residency program back in Massachusetts about 25, 30 years ago now. And one of the things that got me involved with the Massachusetts Academy of Family Physicians was there were some state budget cuts going on that actually really impacted my residency program's finances to the tune of maybe about a quarter of our budget was going to be wiped out by a legislative change in the Massachusetts legislature. So that's actually how I started to get involved with the Mass Academy. It was that area of need, and one of the things I learned over time is that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So that got me involved with the Massachusetts Academy. I learned that the best way to get changes to any legislation or things that the legislature is going to do is be involved with the state chapter. So when this occurred, I also learned that a lot of the bigger teaching hospitals in Boston weren't even aware that this was happening. But in my community hospital-based program, it had a major impact. So got to know people, got to learn the legislative process back in Massachusetts, got to really learn about what the state chapter was doing, and it was really important work. Ultimately helped get some changes made that really protected the residency program, but that it really wouldn't have happened without the state chapter's work. So got to know people over time. Eventually, over many years, actually ended up being president of the state chapter. Then moved to Wisconsin back in 2019, and just being such a believer in the work that state chapters do, wanted to get involved. So here I am.
Well, excellent. We're certainly fortunate that you made the journey west here and landed with us. We're fortunate to have you involved in our academy. Looking at other leaders, kind of from the other side of leadership, what are some qualities that you look for in a leader within the context of family medicine?
Sure. I think a broad perspective. I think that's why family physicians are natural leaders in terms of where the health system needs to go. It's definitely some major challenges with where we are. So I believe in, if you look at leadership positions in medical schools, there are many deans now of medical schools that are family physicians, because the generalist approach and understanding how the system works and impact on the community is particularly important. So I think definitely my leadership skills were like I think most skills learned from other people. So I think mentorship is really crucial. One of the things I think is particularly important in leaders is that they have a high character. So I think character is important, competence is important. I think Colin Powell said if you had to choose one or the other, go with character. But you definitely need competence as well. So there's a specific skill set that I think you need to be an effective leader. I think being an active listener a lifelong learner because over the years the system around you changes, and so to be in a leadership position, you're really responsible for not only knowing where things are but where they're going, or if you're fortunate enough, and I think this is again where organizations come in, getting involved and collaborating with other people is actually how to make changes to the system itself and direct things the way they should go. So I also think particularly I'm a big believer in servant leadership and the whole concept of servant leadership. There have been many books written on servant leadership. So I think the motivation of the leader is doing their work for the good of many and the people that you're trying to lead. That ultimately will be a much more effective leader than someone who's doing it kind of for their own personal reasons.
Yeah, I think that's great, and certainly the concept of servant leader is certainly something that's not foreign to us as an academy and the people that we look for in our leadership as well. And I think all those things you just said are some of the things that have made you a great leader for our chapter and other chapters that you've been involved with. So looking at your role as chair of the Department of Family Medicine at MCW, what is some leadership advice that you would give to a medical student or to a resident who's gone through your program in terms of getting started in their leadership journey?
Sure. So as I said before, I think mentorship, and so finding mentors, and I think organizations like the Wisconsin Academy is a ready source of mentors. Many of my mentors have never worked in my same workplace. It's been through organizations that I've actually gotten so much mentorship. So find mentors. You can have more than one mentor. Different people have different skill sets and different strengths. So I would, as a student or a resident, really think about the qualities that you admire in certain people. And I think people are very happy to help and mentor students and residents. So I think sometimes it's just making the active ask of, this is what I'm thinking about. What opportunities, could I participate in? Getting involved in the state chapter, I think the legislative side is where I came through to state chapters, and I think one of the things I've learned in advocacy is that students and residents are in some respects more effective in a congressional office or in a legislator's office than people in kind of higher positions. Because they know that your motives are pure as a student or resident. If you're talking about things like student debt, I can talk about student debt, but you can tell the story about your student debt and how it's impacting you and how it might be affecting your classmates. So I think your voice is really needed in whether it's legislative or other aspects. Students and residents have a lot of knowledge and energy about their community oftentimes. And so again, I think being somewhat of a community activist through organizational medicine is you bring something to the table that sometimes maybe more senior people do not have. So I think don't underestimate what you bring to the table. I think just stepping up and just like anything else, just doing it, and you might not feel comfortable at the beginning, but you learn that your skill set and your characteristics are such that you'll be very effective in organizations because of the qualities that you bring to the table.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned sharing your story. That's something that I think is important. That's what we're trying to do here with something like our leadership spotlight. Something that is important even for our students and residents to understand is that even at this early career stage, your story is important and it can be impactful, whether it's like you mentioned specifically legislatively, or just sharing what your story has been with your own student or resident colleagues. You never know who your story might reach and might inspire. So you kind of mentioned this a little bit in your earlier answer, but what kind of recommendations do you have in terms of whether it's a book or a resource or an article for somebody in a leadership position or an inspiring leader that you found particularly helpful over your career?
Sure. So I think one of the things that I think is particularly important is reading a lot. Reading, I love history, so in terms of leadership, I'm not looking at only the great physician leaders most of the time I'm not actually. I'm looking at people like Abraham Lincoln and all these other people that dealt with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of opposition, a lot of challenges, and so I think particularly in leadership, some knowledge of history and historical leaders is actually not only interesting, but actually I think I can apply what I've learned through documentaries and things like that. There's a whole business literature about leadership. I've got a home library that's full of leadership books, so I read a lot very specifically about leadership. Again, these are typically not written by physicians. It's usually in the business section of any bookstore. I think people like Malcolm Gladwell and his books, I think helps me think about things maybe in a different way, and helps, I think, sometimes in my visioning as far as where I might want to go. I think Stephen Covey, who's now passed away, but so the books are a little bit older, but Stephen Covey's work, he was a business professor, had a lot of things that people actually refer to a lot, certain coining a phrase of things. So Jim Collins' Good to Great is another book that I would recommend anybody that's interested in leading organizations. I would really recommend them. And then even things like just simply the newspaper or online, anything that's going on in the community, if you know kind of what needs are, because reporters are saying that these are needs of the community. I think being a voracious reader actually is really helpful.
Great. In terms of younger physicians, students, and residents, what are some ways that you've experienced over your career as a leader that where those folks can get involved in their own leadership journey early in their career?
Sure. So I think the thing I would really want to emphasize is people confuse leadership with titles, or that they need a title to be a leader. Some of the finest resident leaders I've ever had as a residency director for 20 plus years, they weren't even the chief resident. So you don't have to be the chief resident. Taking on positions like chief resident is something that does put you in a position of probably facilitates a little bit in terms of talking to the program leadership or at your medical school if there are specific leadership titles. But I would really emphasize the point that if you're passionate about something and you're motivated to make changes and to improve things, you don't need a title. I think the people that get things done oftentimes don't have a specific title, but they do have the passion, they have the willingness to put forth the effort to make some changes, and ultimately you create your own opportunities oftentimes by just looking at what you're interested in. What's the delta that you see? If you look at things and say, this is really doesn't make sense to me, or it's bothersome, or the stone in your shoe kind of thing, pay attention to that and say, well, does that really have to be that way? And then how can we work towards either eliminating those things that get in the way of good patient care or what the community needs, what have you. So I think looking at specific roles that are possible. I think getting involved with I've been on several organizations boards. They oftentimes have student members, those and resident members. I'm also on the review committee for family medicine. There's a resident member. The committee absolutely listens to that resident member because, again, the reason why there's a resident member on the committee is because that they bring a perspective that maybe program directors don't. So just being open and letting people know that you're interested in leadership. I've had students and residents over the years just say, I'm really interested in leadership opportunities. Just even saying something simple like that to a leader in your environment. Then when things come down the pike, they'll say, oh, I remember that conversation I had. I think this could be something that'd be worthwhile. If you've never been to Kansas City for the National Conference of Family Medicine Residents and Medical Students, there's a Congress there. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of opportunities to get involved in that regard too. So lots of opportunities actually if you look for them.
And I think that's important. Something you said there is important is whether it's within AAFP or within your medical school or your residency program, the leadership opportunities that are out there and open to students or residents are because these groups or these institutions really do value your input. It's not just a token. We need to have a student involved. And that's the same certainly for our academy leadership positions. Is you're there because they want to hear from you. They want to know your perspective. They want to know how things are affecting you. So, like you said at the beginning of that answer, I think sometimes you just got to speak up. And to not be afraid and feeling able to do that because your voice does matter and people do want to hear from you and hear your perspective and how things are affecting you. So I think that's a really great piece of advice for anybody anywhere within their leadership journey or any career stage. So we appreciate you taking the time and all this great information and experience that you've shared. So I'll just ask one totally open-ended question.
Yep.
Is there anything else that you would like to add or anything else that you would say to an aspiring leader?
Yeah, I think simply just stepping up and doing it. You don't push forward, and as far as any lack of confidence you may feel, or is this really right for me? Just do a lot of different things, and things stick. You'll find your people. You will find people who are passionate about whatever you're passionate about as well. If you just step up and get involved. I think just acting on your beliefs is really what motivates and will push you through and past any obstacles that you might encounter. I think a leadership ultimately has to do with acting on your beliefs and being in a position where you can affect positive change. So I think the world's your oyster, really. So take advantage of opportunities that present themselves and make your own.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you again for joining us and for participating in the video. Like I said, I think there's a lot of really great lessons to be learned and opportunities that are out there. We look forward to having your continued involvement in the Academy. For those of you that are watching that may want to get involved, whether it's in the WAFP or elsewhere, we encourage you to reach out to us. We'd be happy to share what some of those opportunities are. We've got other leadership resources available on our website, wafp.org, or you can contact us through the website, and we'd be happy to help you, whether it's trying to connect you to a person, a resource, a conference, things of that nature. We're happy to do that. That's our role in serving you as our members. So thank you for joining us, and we will look forward to seeing you on the next installment of the Spotlight.
Thanks, Brandon.